I didn't really think this would be that big of a topic, but a lot of people did ask on stream, so I figured might as well make a video on it. What are my thoughts on the fact that they're increasing the player health? If you guys haven't seen this, let's take a look at the actual post. But this did already happen at Dragonflight launch, okay? We decided to increase both player stamina and enemy damage by 25% in Season 2. This is very much like an adjustment that was made just before the launch of Dragonflight, and it's for the same reasons. When damage mitigation abilities and healings are too strong relative to player health, the only way to threaten players is to make enemy damage very high and spiky. If healers can very quickly top off their teammates and mana isn't a limiting factor, enemies have to be tuned to have the capacity to do burst damage that kills players before healers can react. This isn't satisfying gameplay. Increasing player health and tuning enemy abilities damage appropriately gives players more time to react to incoming damage, and it makes player choices about cooldowns and mana management more meaningful. And so this is entirely true. Like, there's no way you could debate this, right? Like, I don't think anybody likes being one shot. But the thing that I'm confused by is like, it feels like this isn't actually happening in the game to me. Like, to me, it feels like they did have to make damage very high and spiky. And like, it's almost like that's already happened. So it's like, I'm not really sure what doing it a second time. Like, my point is they did this already and it didn't seem to work, right? Because if you got to do it again, what are we just going to do this every season? I don't really understand that. But so whatever, like, I don't really care about the philosophical reason behind it. The reason I was interested in talking about this was because of this part here, okay? Developer, along with adjusting creature damage and player stamina and Embers of Neltharion, we're adjusting the healing done by several talents. For tanks, our goal is to keep their relative strength comparable to 10.0.7. For damage dealers, we're adjusting active healing spells to be more powerful so that they can retain their impact when solo or when supporting a group. We're also adjusting the effectiveness of several healing spells for damage dealers and healers that are based on maximum health to keep their relative effectiveness equivalent. And so this makes a lot of sense, obviously. So player stamina is increased by 25%. All creature spells, and melee damage is increased by 25%. It should make almost no impact, right? But I feel like if it had to make an impact in any class, it would be Blood DK. Obviously, the more damage you take, the more, that's like a scary thing to hear from Blood DK. But with health pool being such a big thing anyway for Blood DK, we'll take more stamina. Like, we're definitely seeing 1 million next season. And you know what? I mean, I think with the different things like Fall Bulwark, even like, Death Strike's like minimum heal, these types of things, all the different like HP scaling things, like Blood DK might be the one that would actually gain the most from this if anybody was going to gain slightly more than the other ones. But then you see this, and this is what makes me a little confused, okay? So they're basically nerfing, like, from what I could tell, or they're buffing things that should just be healing. But there's a couple, there's something missing. You know what I mean? There's no Death Strike. And that's what made me confused because, they said, like, we're not looking to change anything, but there are things that are changing a different amount than you would expect. Like, just right out of the gate, for example, Voracious is a 12% leech now instead of 10%, but 25% of 10 is not 12. It would be 12 and a half. So I don't know if they're just keeping it to round numbers, but that's like a nerf. That's like a relative nerf compared to other things. And then you got Blood Plague, but yeah, like we said, no, there was no like permafrost, no blood shield, no death strike. There's a lot of heals on the DK chart that are not on this list, and I don't know why that is. But I'm not a math guy. That's the problem, and that's what this kind of stuff really trips me up. But you'll see some of these numbers here, like you heal for 10% of all damage you deal to targets with frailty was 8%. So again, not, maybe that is, let's find out, 8 times 0.25. Yeah, okay, no, that's exactly 2. So that one's right. But there's some like on here, like here we go. Regrowth healing is increased by 50% for balance. You know what I mean? So there's things that make me think like, okay, maybe they are trying to do a little bit of a tuning pass as well with some of this. But I think, yeah, I don't, to me, like, I don't care about this. None of this matters. It just seems like maybe there's some things that are not on this list. So if anybody read, some things that they didn't see or why you think some of these things, like for protection, flashlight is 50%, like, they kind of said why they're doing this, but it makes me wonder, like, are there some things that are either getting like maybe too much or too little, and what are your thoughts are on that? But yeah, you guys agree that like Death Strike doesn't need to be changed? I think that's right? Because like Death Strike, the minimum healing is based on your health pool, the maximum is based on the damage taken, so it doesn't actually need any change. And then that means Blood Shield doesn't need any change, and then that means that yeah, pretty much like no matter what, those are always going to do the same relative amount, and they shouldn't be buffed or nerfed, right? Would you guys agree with that? And that's me literally asking you. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. So, but yeah, I was just shocked to not see Death Strike and some other things. But in terms of them doing it, I did want to say like people had been asking about, or they've been commenting about like the difficulty of keys. We've been talking about this all season. I think keys are harder than they've ever been. Like, just I'll just say that out loud. The definitely the hardest season, like for all 5 players wrapped up in one. For tanking, it's probably one of the easiest seasons ever, but as like a whole, it's definitely a harder season than we've had in the past. I get it. The healer's role has been increased, and also like DPS survivability is taxed a lot more. But I think a lot of people are probably, at least at the beginning, were comparing that to season 4 of Shadowlands, which is absolutely out of whack with whatever difficulty should ever exist in this game. So frankly, I think this is where it should be. Like healers should have to work the length that they're working. People talk about like, oh, if you don't, if you don't have enough healing, then you have to do DPS, and that's not fun. There should always be a global that's healing relevant, but that's just never going to exist. Okay, no matter what, there'll always be some global where you do not need to heal, even if that's one global a dungeon, and you will then be not maximizing your character if you do not press a DPS global there. You'll just be AFK. And we've been talking about this for years now, about healers not wanting to go above their role to help the dungeon. And I get it. Like I could see why you would feel that way, but unfortunately, you're choosing to do Mythic Plus. That's the reality. It's a timed dungeon. So sometimes your healing is not the best way to upgrade that key. But in terms of them doing this again, I just can't help but laugh because, like I said, I don't know why they did it before, because it doesn't seem like damage mitigation and healing is too strong relative to player health. Like, do you agree with that or disagree with that? I disagree with that. I don't see how that could be true. I think people like would bring up a counterpoint saying like, well, then why are people able to play with 4 DPS instead of a healer? I don't think that has anything to do with the content, or I don't think that has anything to do with like the general balance of the game. I think that just has something to do with the different specs. Because I started looking into like Shadow Priest and AG from Shaman. It's like that doing an absurd amount of healing. Like it's really a lot when it's up, and it's like really just better than healers. And the same thing with Prop Pally, right? Prop Pally is just better than healers. And Death Knights, like you're never gonna touch my actual, like you will not match my healing ever as a Blood Death Knight. You know what I mean? So is it really the healers that are struggling here? I think like healers are fucked. Like I think this is gonna really suck for them. But it's funny to me. Like this makes me laugh because all these healers who keep saying like, "Oh, it's hard. You think it's hard. You think dungeons are hard. You should play a healer, right?" That's what people are telling me, right, all the time, the whole season. And I did play a healer a bunch, and people are telling me that the whole season how hard it is to be a healer. And then Blizzard's like, healing's way too easy right now. We fucked up. Healing's way too easy. It's like, uh oh. So yeah, I mean, the crazy thing to me, it's like they're like, well, we don't want people to just be getting one shot by shit. It's like, meanwhile, we did like 23 knockout or whatever level it was, and people just like, you don't interrupt, they just delete. Like that's it. Characters, you got to re-level. You got to start at level 1 again. So but so like this is the part that confuses me, right? Because right now it doesn't seem like the actual healing spells from a healer are too powerful. People are trying to convince me that they are on stream before, saying like, no, healers can easily top people off way too quickly. That is not my experience, especially not compared to Shadowlands. It feels like it's way worse than it was in Shadowlands. But it's like, why are you buffing? Like, what is this then? You know what I mean? If right now the problem is too much off healing, then why are you buffing the off healers even more? What is the point of doing that? Why are you buffing rep more? You know what I mean? Word of Glory might be the one that takes the Relative nerf here. I just don't really. I'm sure there's. I just don't see it. You know what I mean? Creates an absorb shield for 30 to 60%. I don't like. I think I'm probably just over reading into it too much. But you guys, let me know what you think about this, especially if you're playing a healer. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think in general they could probably just not post about this and it wouldn't matter. But people asked me about it, so we made a video.